Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott, and we have a fantastic episode today. We're going to talk about something I probably should have addressed a long time ago, as it is a fundamental part of my book, The Reality Revolution, and this is a topic that is discussed by many amazing authors and gurus. Frederick Dodson, Tony Robbins. And for me personally, this is one of the most powerful things that changed my life. If I was to give you one thing that fundamentally changed my life and allowed me to create the realities that I wanted to create, it's shifting my identity. I wanted to talk about identity shifts and why this is the key fundamental element to shifting realities. We talk about the law of attraction, the law of assumption, but behind it all, it's the identity. The identity is the key element, shifting your identity. We can see evidence of the power of identity shifts everywhere. From someone who's obese to becoming an elite athlete, from the heavy smoker to being a non-smoker, from failing English classes to being a celebrated best-selling author. Stories like this inspire us. Why is that? Because they show that transforming ourselves and our lives is possible, and yet sadly for many, living the lives of their dreams remains a fantasy too good to be true. I know that many of you are straining and struggling to achieve your goals, and you seem unaware of the most fantastic success hack for goal achievement in every area of your life. Shifting your identity. What exactly is identity? Tony Robbins defines it as simply the beliefs that we use to define our own individuality. What makes us unique, good, bad, or indifferent from other individuals. And our sense of certainty about who we are creates the boundaries and limits within which we live. As Tony Robbins says also, your capability is constant, but how much of it you use depends upon the identity you have for yourself. Life becomes so interesting and fascinating once you realize there are many versions of yourself and millions of options that await you. The hundreds of highways already laid out in front of you may be called your destiny or your highest probability. When you shift your identity, you shift your reality. As Frederick Dodson points out, there are plenty of hard science indicators that an identity shift causes a reality shift. But here is just one of the more extreme examples. In researching multiple personality disorder, it has been proven again and again that extreme changes can occur when someone shifts identity. In clinical studies of multiple personality disorder, people have been witness to lose 20 pounds within a few days. Facial scars suddenly disappear completely as if they had never been there or returned when they shifted back. People's voices, memories, and looks transformed within minutes and so on. But an identity shift does not only change the body, it changes the whole body of experience, as science will someday have the courage to admit. Since the outside world is not separate from consciousness, changing the self equals changing the outside world. In this light, you may understand how superfluous and unnecessarily complicated it is to use affirmations and visualizations in order to make something happen out there. We've established on this podcast that at every moment you're always sort of standing at a crossover point between many realities. Which direction you take is your choice. There is a version of you that is available if you can shift your identity. Neville Goddard clearly states this when he says, if man's concept of himself were different, everything in his world would be different. His concept of himself being what it is, everything in his world must be as it is. You cannot rely on willpower or motivation to achieve your goals because most of your actions result from subconscious programming related to your identity. You have been told what you can or cannot do throughout your life, what your talents are, how you should behave, and how the world around you works. You've adopted those messages as truths, and now live your life according to these truths, and you have shaped and crafted your identity around them. Maybe you, like me, were terrible at sports. Throughout your school years, you struggled. You didn't care to exercise because you attached the label of an unathletic person to yourself. Maybe you even hated it and avoided it at all costs. And now you're in your 30s or 40s and you're living the couch potato lifestyle because that's your identity. If you now set the goal of finishing a marathon, your self-image is out of alignment with that goal. You are, after all, the opposite of a marathon runner. You're a couch potato. And this couch potato identity will make it hard to stick to any workout regime or healthy eating habits you decide to implement. No amount of willpower or motivation will be enough to create lasting habit change if the fundamental belief of who you are goes against the behaviors you wish to implement. That's why so many people self-sabotage. If you tell yourself that you hate to exercise, your subconscious will find ways to keep you from progressing in your training. Neville Goddard also says your concept of yourself can only be driven out of consciousness by another concept of yourself. By creating an ideal in your mind, you can identify yourself with it until you become one and the same with the ideal, thereby transforming yourself into it. If you want to shift your identity, you first need to get a clear picture of your current beliefs. I suggest writing down a list of the labels you usually use to describe yourself. Then go through that list and decide which ones are not serving you or even detrimental to the achievements of your goals. To stay with our example of the couch potato who wants to run a marathon, you may even note that you are unathletic, hate to exercise, and addicted to junk food. Now think about the labels you would give yourself if you were a marathon runner. How would you behave, think, and feel if you'd already been that version? Write that down too. This will serve as the blueprint of your ideal self. Once you have a clear picture of your ideal self's character or your new identity's character traits and thinking habits, it's time to embody it. Often people have the process backwards. Maybe you too think that you'll feel fit and healthy once you have finished your marathon, but you must step into that version of yourself right now. You must shift your identity right now. Only when you embody the person capable of achieving the goal will you have a chance of achieving it. Of course, identifying with new behaviors and thought processes is easier said than done. After all, you've lived with your old identity for years and years and are comfortable with your current identity. If you've identified as someone who hates to exercise for the past 20 years, you don't suddenly wake up tomorrow as someone who enjoys themselves most when breaking a sweat. This is why visualization techniques and affirmations and a daily journaling practice are helpful. Using these tools can reprogram your subconscious mind and change your self-image. Remind yourself daily of the person you want to be, the person who can achieve the goals you set out to achieve, and who is already living the life you want to live. Then follow up with daily actions to strengthen your new identity. When you do both, reprogram your subconscious mind and take daily action on your goals, you begin to shift into your new identity. Your outer reality will change as well. You will achieve the goals you set for yourself and start living the life you once dared to dream about. What exactly is an identity shift? How can you successfully change your identity by changing your beliefs? An identity shift is when you choose to change your identity, moving closer to your ideal self. In doing so, you can become the person you want to be and live a better life. If you want to change your identity, it's a good idea to change your beliefs about yourself first. If you take actions that conflict with your identity, it can create internal confusion that leads to an identity crisis. So we must avoid an identity crisis. Identity crisis causes you to feel disoriented, question your beliefs, and fear the pain of the unknown. For example, if you identify as an honest person, and then you lie to your spouse on top of your guilt for lying, you may be in disbelief that you lied because it goes against who you are, and you may start to question whether you truly know yourself. In other cases, identity crises are triggered not by actions you take, but by experiences you have. One common example is the midlife crisis, which results from a struggle to transition from the identity of a young person to that of an aging person. A midlife crisis is usually triggered by something that conflicts with your perceived identity as a young person. You reach a certain age, you notice your body aging, or someone says something to you that they wouldn't say to a younger person. Anytime you adopt an identity that's tied to something that changes, such as your age, attractiveness, or job, you're almost guaranteeing an identity crisis at some point down the road. How do we have an identity shift? Well, first, to avoid the identity crisis, if you want to change your behavior, change your identity to fit the behavior you want to maintain. Since your identity comprises your beliefs about yourself, use the strategies that I discuss for changing beliefs to do this. For example, if you want to lose weight and become stronger, you need to shed the identity of an overweight person and the belief that this is fundamentally who you are, and adopt the belief that you are a healthy person. With your new identity, when someone gives you the choice between a donut and oatmeal, you'll be less tempted to indulge in the donut because that's just not who you are. Rather, you are someone who values your health and longevity, and the way to support those values is to choose the oatmeal. In some cases, you may not need to discard your old identity entirely, but rather expand it to encompass your ideals. There may be nothing about your current identity that is holding you back from achieving your goals and living the life you want, except that it doesn't include certain beliefs. As long as the beliefs and characteristics that you want to adopt don't conflict with your current identity, which could cause an identity crisis, decide to expand your identity to encompass these traits. If you're an ambitious introvert with dreams of becoming a top-selling realtor, you don't have to abandon your introversion or your dream. Instead, you become an ambitious introvert who is also confident, personable, and an expert in architecture and design. Paradoxically, although you can't change your behaviors without changing your identity, neither can you change your identity without changing your behaviors to reinforce it. In order to have an identity shift, first, change what you believe about yourself. Then, internalize those beliefs through your behavior. In other words, through your words and actions. The more you walk the walk and act as if you are the person you're trying to be, the more you will become that. This is the key to having an identity shift. So take a few moments now to evaluate your current identity and the identity you would like to embody. Then follow these steps to have an identity shift. First of all, relax. Get into an open-minded state. And secondly, ask yourself, who am I? Write down whatever comes to mind. Repeat this multiple times, each time writing whatever occurs to you, and continue until you hit on something that resonates with you. Third, if you're having trouble figuring out who you are, try this exercise. If there were an entry about you in the dictionary, what would it say? Alternatively, if you created an ID card that reflected who you really are, what information would it include and what would it exclude? Would it have your photo, physical description, beliefs, affiliations, motto, aspirations, abilities, accomplishments? Fourth, reflect on the way you've just identified yourself. Does your identity evoke pain or pleasure? If it carries pain, remember that you have chosen to adopt this identity. It doesn't define you, and you can just as easily choose to alter it. Fifth, write a list of all the qualities you would want to include in your identity. Think of the people who possess these traits. Now imagine yourself embodying these qualities. How would it affect how you talk, think, and feel? Sixth, describe in detail who you want to be. When you assume this new identity, what kinds of actions, thoughts, and emotions do you want your new identity to trigger? Seventh, create a plan for embodying your new identity. What behaviors would you need to adopt to be consistent with your new identity? Which friends would you spend your time with to reinforce your new identity? And finally, commit yourself to this change. Every day, use your new label to describe yourself, both when you're thinking to yourself and talking to others, and tell your friends and family about your new identity. If you and everyone around you begin to see you in this new light, you will eventually internalize your new identity. If you think about it, we all have the same firm and well-worn ideas about who we think we are. Identity is a key to your human development. We learn how to differentiate ourselves from the world around us by learning what makes us different. Many of these discoveries end up becoming a core part of our identity. The only problem, most of those ideas came from when we were 7 years old or less. Think back to when you were 7 and compare that to where you are right now. Now, you've done a whole lot with your life since then, but your brain is still holding on to these ideas that came from that era in your life, and some of those ideas are very much getting in your way right now. These things can be limiting beliefs, but they can also become core pieces of your identity. For example, you grew up watching your parents fight and argue about money. They undoubtedly taught you a few lessons about money, or maybe you heard them say that rich people are evil and greedy, etc. Now, fast forward to where you are now in life. Maybe you're trying to manifest more money and create the abundance in your life that you've always dreamed of. But for some reason, all those juicy money goals continue to elude you. Even though way back then you simply heard those ideas about money, some of them trickled down and became part of the way you view yourself. After all, our parents are our biggest role models. We literally model ourselves after them, and we are subconsciously programmed by their beliefs and fears. But if you fundamentally believe that you're just poor people and rich people, and therefore that you can't become rich, obviously that's going to have an effect on your current ability to make money. If you subconsciously believe there's no possible way to get from A to B, then of course you're not going to try very hard. That's just one example, but I'm sure that you can relate to it. Maybe it's not money that you're struggling with. Maybe it's love or success or something else entirely, but the principles remain the same. You attract who you are. So the question comes again, as we talked about before. Who are you? For that, I want you to take a good, honest look at your life and understand the part you have played in it. We have tolerated certain events and circumstances to the point that these things, even if we don't like them, have become our new normal. The bottom line is that if you're ready to finally drop your old stories and patterns in order to manifest your perfect future, you're also going to have to drop your old identity. But since identity is a multifaceted topic today, let's talk about 3 aspects of your identity that you can work on shifting right now while I speak to you. First of all, your invisible set point. As crazy as it seems, we all have an invisible set point for life. We have our minimum standards. We also have a maximum standard. One example where this is quite obvious is in your romantic life. We all have dating minimum standards, and I bet we can think of a friend whose minimum is far below ours. However, we all do the same thing with money, career, success, etc. But whether your set point is low or high, it's going to be a challenge for you to change it. Essentially, your brain doesn't care if your life is getting better or worse. Either one represents the same thing, change. As we learn, our brain absolutely hates change, even when we're changing into exactly what we want. However, you are what you tolerate. You tolerate what you think you deserve. When you don't think you deserve more, then you're never going to let yourself get more. So it's time to fundamentally change your perceptions of yourself so that you can allow in more. These minimum and maximum standards are part of our core identity, and they control what we think we deserve in life. For most of us, that means that our standards and our havingness levels are way, way too low. But we are the ones creating the set point, and that means we have the power to raise our set point so that we feel deserving of the things we want. So think about your minimum and maximum standards in life. Maybe you would never dream of taking a job that paid less than $50,000 a year. But what would happen if you changed that to $75,000 a year? What is your minimum and maximum standards for love, wealth, health, all of it? Maybe you sometimes see a very attractive person somewhere and you think to yourself, oh, out of my league. Well, what if they weren't? What would you be doing differently if you didn't make that assumption? Our internal set point can be tricky to identity at first, but once you do it and become aware of it, it will become gradually easier to start pushing up your standards at both your low and high ends. The second thing I want you to look at is your limitations. You can only ever do in life what you fundamentally believe you're capable of. After all, if you think you'll fail, you'll probably not give something your all if you even bother to try it all. However, there's a big disconnect between what we think we can do and what we are actually capable of. Most of us limit our future based on only what we know we can already do. All too often, we base our future ideas based off of what we've done in the past. For example, I could never fly a plane isn't actually true at all. With enough training, you probably could learn to fly a plane. So why is it so easy to tell yourself, I can't? Again, it's your subconscious mind's job to keep you safe, and new activities are always potentially dangerous to this part of you, even though this is completely illogical. We're all living proof that we can learn new things and try new projects. Yet for some reason, we don't think we can go any farther than we've already come. For example, we believe we just aren't capable of learning more about money or relationships or whatever. But that limitation is really just being projected by us. We really are capable of achieving anything we put our minds to, even if we've never done it before. Once you realize your so-called limitations are just things you've decided to believe about yourself, then you'll be so inspired to drop them and find out what you're really capable of. So the next time you find yourself saying or thinking, oh, I could never do that, I want you to stop and ask yourself if that is true. Why are you defaulting to that answer? What might happen if you gave it a shot? The best way to prove this one wrong is to go out there and to challenge yourself. The more you do this, the fewer of your so-called limitations you will still believe in. Remember what I said before. You attract who you are. Continue to remind yourself of that, and perhaps you should write it down on a Post-it note and put it up somewhere where you are regularly. You attract who you are. Again, we have no problem dreaming big and thinking of what we desire for our life. But we do have an awfully big problem making those visions come true. So why is that? Most of us think of a goal and we put all our effort into making it happen. If I just try this new thing, create this new funnel, get this new job, then I will get X and then feel good about myself. But doing life that way is just as difficult as rolling a rock uphill. Yes, you're focused on your goal, and yes, you're doing something about it. But you'll keep finding yourself getting pushback over and over again. Essentially, you're making what should be a straightforward change into a very rocky and time-consuming journey. When you use your actions to change the world, you're still relying on something outside of yourself to do the magic. However, the magic is really in you. It's only once you change the way you perceive yourself, then you'll finally create the momentum to get the rock to the top of that hill. If you don't change the way you see yourself, the world is not going to change for you. Right now, you probably think that you'll feel good once you achieve your goal, when in reality, you'll only achieve the goal when you already feel good. This is truly the level 2.0 of manifestation and reality creation, well beyond just feeling good. Not only do you need to feel the feelings of what you want, but you need to embody the person, the identity you really want to be. In other words, if you don't do the identity shifting, you'll simply keep on attracting who you already are. And trust me, you're probably already doing that, and it is not very much fun. So let me ask you, who do you tell the world that you are? What words do you use to describe yourself? I want you to think about it. Who do you really want to be? Pick a few of those words that describe your future and work on embodying them now. This isn't about working until you believe it. It's all about believing first and shifting into who you really want to be. And the beautiful thing is, you can start doing this moment right now as you're listening to me. What part of your identity is holding you back? Who do you really need to be to have what you want in life? Just remember, the way to perceive yourself now is not reflective of where you want to go in life. We know this because your old identity has created your current results. It's time to shift in closer to what you want and drop the parts of you that are not working in your favor. Your identity is really a choice. Even you chose a lot of it when you were very young and certainly weren't thinking about where you want to be in life right now, but you are a conscious creator, and it's time for you to start consciously creating the exact life you were brought here to create. Frederick Dodson goes into greater detail in his book Parallel Universes of Self when he talks about changing the worldly identity. Changing the worldly identity is one of the paths of the wizard, he says. The true wizard or shaman is someone who has extraordinary abilities in perception, creation, and action. The reason for this is because he does not merely operate from the viewpoint of a personality or identity, but from the viewpoint of the higher self, which includes all of the different identities. By changing your identity, the wizard within you recognizes the basic truths that you are none of the identities and corresponding realities, that you are something much bigger and brighter than a collection of hobbies, surroundings, and traits. Personality and identity is a construct of consciousness. There are different forms of identity change. Dodson recognizes two. He recognizes extreme identity change and identity change light. Now, extreme identity change, this would involve giving up your entire life as you know it and build up a brand new life. This might include changing your name and profession, leaving your family, moving to another location, giving up your past, and throwing away anything that reminds you of that past. Now, I chose my name to Brian Scott because it's easier for people to remember. But just that simple act of changing my name changed my identity. Now I'm Brian Scott. I'm not Brian Binkson. And it changed who I was. It gave me permission to be someone else. Now, in even more extreme variation identity change, you wouldn't even remain in the same country or linguistic area. You'd learn a new language, a new job, have a new style of dressing yourself, build up an entirely new circle of friends, develop new habits. And yet, even more extreme variation of identity shifting, you'd abandon your newly made identity after only half a year and move on to another identity. In this way, you'd travel from place to place, from reality to reality, always as another person with another past and another future and another name. The extreme identity change and the ultra-extreme identity change, of course, require a depth of self-trust, usually not found in modern society. It would also require the trust that you can create any reality you like. If you don't believe that, perhaps a less intense or extreme identity shift may be required. But these things would absolutely change your reality. If you were to move to another place, change your name, and completely become someone else, you would very soon find that your reality would change with it. Now, there's the identity change light. Certainly, people are sensitive and resistant to change and your own magical abilities. So a light version of identity change would involve simply changing or removing one single element of an identity and replacing it with another. These are the elements of identity that Frederick Dodson identifies that you can work with. You can write these down when you journal about your identity. Your name, a profession or regular activity, family, friend, and foes, a place of living, ownership of material objects, documents that prove your identity, passports or birth certificates, things that prove your past like objects or pictures or certificates, languages and dialects you speak, certainly most used vocabulary, typical phrases, intonations, idioms, and ways to communicate, certain looks of your body and face, certain gestures, mimics, and movements, certain hobbies, preferred places and regular activities, certain character traits and attitudes, certain desires, dreams, and goals, certain resistances and preferences, certain strengths and weaknesses. Changing, removing, or replacing even one of those elements can be a fun cause of a slight identity shift, and it can give you a fresh rush of energy. You could change the name by which people call you. You could change the friends you spend time with. You could even change your enemies. You can change your job or where you live. You could change the way you behave and speak. Cults and sects often use methods of de-identification, but not for purposes of reality creation, rather for purposes of re-indoctrination into their specific belief system. In changing elements of the world self, you are having fun, meddling with your core identity, which is basically a mask hiding your soul. This is one of the many methods to reconnect to a truer part of yourself. One of the fundamental ideas we talk about regularly on this podcast is that we are all one. You can see yourself in everyone. So if you have an identity of a certain thing or idea, you are limiting your understanding of the universe. When you begin to identify with everyone and you shed the definitions and constructs of who you are, it opens you to greater possibilities. When you connect to the higher self, you connect to all the infinite identities that are available to you and who you truly are. You are all things. And one of the ways to truly understand this is to go through an identity shift, even a singular identity shift. And you'll notice how easy it is and how your world changes. Tony Robbins calls identity as the key to expansion. We act consistently with our views of who we truly are, whether that view is accurate or not. The reason is, one of the strongest forces in the human organism is this need for consistency with our identity. Throughout our lives, we've been socialized to link massive pain to inconsistency and pleasure to being consistent with our identity. I want you to think about it. What labels do you attach to people who say one thing and then do another, who claim to be one way and then behave another? Of course, we call them hypocrites. Unstable, unreliable, wishy-washy, scatterbrained, flaky, untrustworthy. Would you like to have those labels attached to you? You don't want to be called a hypocrite. Would you even like to think of yourself in this way? Obviously, no. And as a result, whenever you take a stand, especially a public stand, and state what you believe, who you are, or what you are about, you experience intense pressure to remain consistent with that stand, regardless of what that inflexibility may cost you in the future. There are tremendous rewards for remaining consistent with your stated identity. What do we call people who are consistent? We use words like trustworthy and loyal and steady, solid, intelligent, and stable. Ralph Waldo Emerson stated, "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds." The need to remain consistent becomes irrevocably tied to your ability to avoid pain and gain pleasure, and so you stick with your identity because you want to avoid being inconsistent with who you are. The Pygmalion effect works in reverse. If you feel certain that you are learning disabled, for instance, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, of course, if you change that to believing that your learning is just ineffective, then you can change your strategy. A person might develop the belief that they have developed a drug addiction. That means that you can change it. Instead of saying that you are a drug addict, that means that your identity is being a drug addict. We all have a need for a sense of certainty. Most people have tremendous fear of the unknown. Uncertainty implies the potential of having pain, and we'd rather deal with the pain we already know about rather than deal with the pain of the unknown. So as we develop new beliefs about who we are, our behavior will change to support the new identity. As Tony Robbins says, in fact, one shift in identity can cause a shift of your entire master system. Think about what he's saying there. Doesn't a drug addict have a completely different system of evaluation? The states he consistently experiences, the questions he asks, the values that guide their actions, and the references he organizes into beliefs, than does someone who considers themselves to be a leader, a lover, an athlete, or a contributor. While it's true that not all identity shifts are as complete as others, some are indeed so far-reaching that one master system is literally replaced in a moment by another. If you've repeatedly attempted to make a particular change in your life, only to continue to fall short, invariably the challenge is what you were trying to create, a behavioral or emotional shift that was inconsistent with your identity. Shifting and changing or expanding identity can produce the most profound and rapid improvements in the quality of your life. Just take a moment to think about how your identity is formed. Take a moment to identify who you are. Who are you? Not what your friends think of you or your parents. Who are you? Who do you want to be? You don't have to be a prisoner of your past. You don't. Your past has defined you up to this point because you didn't understand that you have the ability to change your own identity. Are you now the same person you were when you started to play this episode? I am continually redefining myself, and I continually catch myself when I am stuck in my old identity. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I could never do that," or "that's just not me," I want you to take a moment to consider the impact of what you're saying or thinking. Have you limited your concept of who you are? Take advantage of every opportunity to expand your identity. Get yourself to do those things you don't think you can do, and use your new actions as a reference that gives you a sense of certainty that you are more than you thought. Begin to ask yourself, what more can I be? What more will I be? Who am I becoming now? Think about your values and your dreams and commit to yourself that regardless of wherever you're at, your environment, say to yourself, I will consistently act as a person who is already achieving these goals. I will breathe this way. I will move this way. I will respond to people this way. I will treat people with the kind of dignity, respect, compassion, and love that this person would be that you want to identify with. Right now, you are at a crossroads. This is your chance to make the most important decision you will ever make. Forget your past. Who are you now? Who have you decided you really are now? Don't think about who you have been. Who are you now? Who have you decided to become? Make this decision consciously. Make it carefully. Make it powerfully. There are 2 meditations on the channel that you can check out that are dedicated to identity shifts. You can check out the Identity Shift Meditation and Shifting Your Identity Meditation. Both of them are a little bit different, but those, through meditation, attempt to define your identity, but it goes way beyond meditation. And I apologize for not addressing this much, much sooner. I want you to consistently think about this on a regular basis. Who am I? And I want you to start to define a new identity for yourself that is what you want to be. Not in the things you're experiencing, but who you are, because who you are will attract all the things in your life. And it's that simple. You can change your identity in a millisecond. For most, it takes a long pattern of autosuggestion and changes in their own behavior and actions. But at your very core, you can change it right now. If you identify with your higher self and identify all the limitless possibilities available to who you truly are. And I challenge you to thoroughly question your identity and all the things that make up who you think you are, and to change those beliefs into who you want to be. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.
Thank you.